you do feel some kind of responsibility, especially if you were the host. Is that the case, Amy?
Oh, absolutely. And Dan and I were also talking prior about how clients are looking to us. The opening montage illustrated perfectly that people have experimented throughout the last few years, and maybe
That's true.
some things worked and some things didn't. And then some are coming at it where they've used an internal MC for their events, and then they're looking to me to provide guidance and some expertise. I have a call later this week and I'm to provide some questions so they're really prepared for their next event and know what to look out for.
Oh, so is it something that's changed in the last 20 months that people are getting more and more
Yes.
prepared?
Yeah, I would say I did some virtual events in studio over 6 years ago, but obviously with the whole pandemic thing, we are forced to go online, right?
Yeah.
So I guess, people have gone through a learning curve, kind of like the opening montage illustrated, if that makes sense. And now they're looking to step up their virtual events to another level.
Dan, so Amy has just been telling that there's been few events where she could be there with people. I mean, in person events. What has been your experience in the last, let's say, 12 months?
The 12 months have been incredible. All right. This has been such a stretch of imagination, of creativity, of purpose, of everything. I mean, we know that as moderators, our role is to be the bridge between the content and the audience, the speakers and the audience, the event organizers and the audience. But how that bridge happens, game changer. I was not talking to a camera. I used to have a microphone, as you can see in the video next to me, and be walking around on stage. And how you interact on a stage is radically different from how you interact on a camera. I will say this as well, but this setup over here, this microphone, that camera, the lights, these are things that now we got to figure out. Now, Maciej, you're lucky because you're in the studio with some producers,
That is
some
true.
light crew, and all of that, and you have that option as well. So it's the entire gamut. It's the entire gamut of being in my house,
I
setting up
agree.
everything, to going to a studio with the whole team, to then doing hybrid where you have
Yeah.
an in-person audience and a virtual audience, and you're doing both at the same time. So this 12 months has been such a stretch of growth for me.
It was, but I wanted to say that not just I'm lucky, but actually Amy is lucky too, because I've heard or I've read that her husband helped her behind the camera. Is that true, Amy?
Yeah, we have a few different options here. We converted a room in our home to a virtual broadcasting studio, and that's actually where I'm coming to you live from today. And I know you asked about this background. This is an actual physical background, it's not virtual. I know we can get to green screen discussions later, but yes, he's been in video production for over 20 years.
Oh,
So we have
wow. Lucky you.
options where we can do 4K and different pre recorded as well as live streaming options. Uh, on a different level. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
and that is all in San Joseph, Michigan, isn't it?
that is where we live. Yep, right across Lake Michigan from Chicago.
Oh, see, because that maybe is the thing that I got me thinking recently, and I wanted to ask you, Dan, do you see this as a big opportunity for MCs out there? That in the virtual world, it doesn't really matter if we live in a big city. I mean, Amy lives close enough to Chicago, but then many times she'd have to travel to New York or to Los Angeles. And then these days, traveling doesn't happen that much. Dan, what's your take on that?
That's a really good question, Maciej. So here's the honest truth, okay? I do not have the level of experience that Amy or you yourself, Maciej, have. I'm new to this game, right? I've been doing hosting for about 4 years. So I don't know a world before of television or anything of that sort. I started doing virtual by going on to Instagram Live or Facebook Live off of my webcam on my computer, and I started there. And I spent the pandemic actually in an elephant sanctuary in India. So I was far from any major urban city or any studio.
I see
I
that.
found, by great fortune, a music studio, and they had some equipment for recording. And I spoke to them and said, hey, it looks like I might be able to do some virtual events from India as long as you have a good connection. good internet connection? They said, yes, we do. And the rest we just made up. But from that music studio, converted music studio, from an elephant sanctuary in South India with a pretty good internet connection, I was hosting events for Microsoft, Bentley, Fiat Chrysler, and some major Fortune 500 companies. So it is possible to host from anywhere, but you've got to relearn the game.
And you can host daily and yet work out daily. And I mean that because I've been following your Instagram, and I know that you're quite an ambitious guy.
I do love to pack in the day as much as possible. We get this one life. So I want to live every day to its fullest.
Yeah, that for sure. You know, we've mentioned studios and everything, and so my producers just suggested that we see the behind the scenes of this space. And so we'll show you our green screen and how this works. Oh, you see that? Does it work?
Yes, we do.
Yes,
my goodness, yes. So that's what we look like when we're stripped, almost. Because I don't know if it's decent to show this much behind the scenes. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it's
like
brilliant. Yeah, full green screen. Yep, floor and walls. That's what I figured in order to strip in the chroma. Yeah, it's great.
It is, but I wanted to relate to what Amy said, that she actually has a physical background behind her. And that's something that I appreciate. Maybe not everybody drives so much attention to such details, but I see a difference between a background that's auto-generated, like in my case, and your background. It just seems more natural. I still can feel the difference.
Thanks for mentioning that. I will say that almost every client for whom I've hosted in these last 2 years has picked an actual physical background because of that very reason, the authenticity, the realness. I know Dan mentioned before that he wasn't crazy about using a green screen at times. There are definitely uses for it. Where I've done more green screen work is for pre-recorded segments, whether it be teaser videos or pre-recorded segments that go out on a live stream.
What do you think, Dan?
So different use cases, right? I'm a mover. And so physical stages are great for that. We get a couple cameras on into a physical background. I think that really helps because it creates that kind of TV show, TV studio vibe. But if we're going to do the stuff that you're doing right now, where you're embedding other people into the shot, and you're adding lower third graphics and all of that, I actually think green screen works better because you can control every part of it. Right now around my border, there's a white frame, so you control that. You can change it to any color. If you want to have 4 of me, or you want to put in a PowerPoint, or what you call a pip, these are all possible on green screen better than on a physical. Exactly. So I think it just depends on the use case, depends on the creativity of the event and the producers.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, some events are even going farther into metaverse, for example, so that there are some physical parts and some generated parts. And IAA, one of your most important events, the event for electromobility and mobility as such, is a good example of that.
Yes, I mean, we did experiment with VR, AR, metaverse. I still haven't hosted an event in the metaverse, but we were just talking about this in the team yesterday, saying, I wonder if, I know there's been has there been a concert? No, concerts have been on Twitch. I don't know what, like metaverse to me is something that I'm exploring in the form of games, but not events. I'm sure, I heard about a wedding in the metaverse. I know a friend of mine is doing a birthday in the metaverse, but a full-on conference or event, I don't know. I'd be curious. Do you guys know if there's been a significant event that's happened?
Amy?
I'm not aware, but isn't Rocco speaking about the metaverse in our next segment on this very stage?
Yes, he will. He will. So I'm sure that this will be covered. And I also wanted to react to what Dan has said. If a wedding was possible in the metaverse, then why wouldn't an actual event be possible, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And Amy, tell me please about your experiences with maybe augmented reality, if you've had any, or maybe just any ways to increase the level of engagement. Because one of the things that I've seen in your show reel is some things that you have done with Jeff Civilico, another great entertainer from Los Angeles. And so he's done quite a few, and I know that you guys sometimes work together.
Yeah, thanks for calling that out. I did want to kind of take the conversation next to the engagement since we are in the engagement stage.
Yes.
And what I don't think I'll focus as much as on VR. Maybe Dan wants to address that. But what I want to focus in on is how to engage the audience. And the number one thing is that people want to be seen, heard, and appreciated, right? In life.
Always.
And that applies to virtual events. So we want to acknowledge them immediately, come at it with heart, soul, and warmth, that compassionate human connection, establish that right away, and then encourage them to interact. Now, not everyone will engage in chat, but the more we can tug at their hearts and look directly into the camera and encourage them to participate, have good content, call out their comments and questions in real time. It's all part of a collaborative experience to help them feel like they're really part of something exciting.
Speaking of real-time comments, Sabrina just commented saying that fashion house Gucci has had an event in the metaverse in collaboration with Roblox. And Michael just reacted to the green screen theme. He says it has its place, but there's more progress to be made on realism. And I want to stick to engagement, though, and ask Dan about his ways of improving that, because I know that interaction is also important to you. You also, just like Amy does, want the real engagement, authenticity, and human-to-human interaction, but you also use games and you also use quizzes, a lot of stuff actually.
So I completely agree what Amy said. I think as humans, as a species, we want to be loved, we want to be seen, we want to be heard, and there's huge scope to improve in this. Mostly the audience can see me. Very rarely can I see the audience. Even when you're showing the behind the scenes, Machi, I think you can see their comments, but unless you're someone like Tony Robbins or one of these guys that have those epic studios where they're able to put in all the different cameras, it's not possible to see the audience. And I'd love to see the audience. I know the technology is there, but I don't know why studios are not jumping at this, because to me, this is a game
I've
changer.
seen that on America's Got Talent, for example. I think Amy's
Yes.
familiar with that.
Yes.
Sure.
So they do. It is possible. The technology's there, but we're not thinking about that. Like when you do an in-person event, you immediately think about where to seat an audience. When you do virtual events, for some reason, producers don't think about how to place the audience in the screen. So to me, there's a lot of scope for this, but I absolutely want to see, hear, feel people. I love the element of surprise. Now, here's the thing. Virtual consumption is very different than in-person consumption. When someone goes to a conference center, they've committed for the day to be there. And then you want to create a sense of FOMO. So which hall, which room, which workshop, and it's the plethora of different things happening that makes an event interesting. When you're online, people know that invariably that content is going to be available later. This piece here, people can probably watch in the future. So there isn't a need to tune in now. The only reason to do that is to create some spontaneous, impromptu, real-time experiences. And this is why I do things like games, dance, music, competitions, challenges, because you cannot relive that in the future. Whereas this talk, you can watch a 3x or 4x in the future, and that's a better use of your time. But something I create right now, an experience I create right now, cannot be relived. And that's why I focus on that when it comes to engagement.
And for sure, and that probably is why strategy is so important, that you think of what the consumption model will be ahead of time before you actually come up with an agenda. Amy, this is over to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I have experience just from yesterday, an event that just will add a few things to what Dan just said. It was an event on Teams, and actually we did have a green screen with a virtual background logoed. That was fine. And I did love being able to see the few participants who did turn on their cameras. Of course, I invited everyone at the beginning to turn on their cameras, and most of them didn't, but enough did so that when
No surprise.
they had a mentalist and magician, it was the tech industry, and there were volunteers, so they all had to have their cameras on. So it was so fun participating. Of course, I was on camera the whole time, and just being able to see their reactions throughout the entire event was so refreshing. So I totally support what Dan says. Hopefully we'll be able to see the audience more in the future.
I hope for that, but if you, as an American, say that people tend to be skeptical of showing their faces, of going online and just turning on their cameras, I'm worried that this might never happen here in Poland, because I see the obvious difference just when watching America's Got Talent and then the Polish version, Poland's Got Talent. You know, our audiences tend not to react quite as energetically.
Sure. I do think that the ideas about polls, surveys, calling out people's comments, even if they are literally talking about it's snowing outside in Maryland, say that,
Yeah.
and then other people are saying, oh yeah, it's warmer here, it's snowing here too. That draws you in, it's happening live. You are part of an experience.
And I know that Dan likes to start his events, his virtual events, with, are you a coffee or are you a tea person? Is that true?
Well, here's the deal, right? When it comes to engagement, you have to consider cultural context. To this day, when people ask me what has been like your top tip when it comes to engagement, the example I give of the most challenging engagement has always been the business audience in Poland. To this day, that is my hardest audience to work with. I find Indian students, Kenyan students, and generally American audience the easiest to work with, whereas the Polish business crew to be the hardest. And my
See,
proudest
this
moment
is
of
my
engagement,
everyday.
yes, my proudest moment has been getting a suited crowd to dance with me at a Polish event.
Right.
That was the most challenging, and it took a lot because I'm a brown guy who doesn't speak a word of Polish, coming in as an outsider and being accepted enough to do that. So cultural context is important. Now, that is not the norm. So what I'm trying to say here is I start with coffee and tea because universally people drink coffee and tea. I start with cat and dog because universally people have an opinion on that. But when I do US events, I talk more about politics and sports than when I do European events. When I do European events, there are things that are culturally more relevant here than when I'm in Singapore or in India. When I'm there, I work on different content. So it's important to know what is the comfort zone of an audience, to meet them there and then take them a little bit outside, but not excessively, otherwise you'll lose them. So in some countries, switching on cameras, totally fine. In others, it takes a little while to warm them up. In some countries, calling them by first name, right? Easy tactic. Always use people's first name. Macho, you've been doing this all the time, and that's great so
Sure.
far. But I know in India, you have to put a sir or a ma'am, an uncle or an aunt. You cannot just call them by first name because then they immediately think you're being rude.
I'm glad you say that.
So just being aware of those things, I think, is really important for effective engagement.
Mhm. And then,
And,
Amy,
yeah, go ahead.
I see
Yeah.
that you like to react to Dan's words.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for calling that out. You're right. Well, speaking of that, part of my engagement strategy, if you will, or it just comes naturally with on camera experience, dating back many years, is to listen and react in real time. You just picked up on my cues. So that is part of the role of a great MC. You're completely in the moment, right? Whether it's live, hybrid, or in person on stage. You're reacting and you're calling out things in real time, whether it's comments from the audience, you're reading the room, taking notes when you're off screen at a virtual event, and you can bring something up later, tell the speaker what resonated with the audiences and what resonated with me. The speaker is usually busy, right? If it's a keynote speaker, they're usually just talking and they're not able to monitor the comments and the reactions. So it's helpful to relay those messages back to the speaker.
And that's also when the importance of a professional MC comes in, because you have that person who's able to process all this information that a speaker maybe cannot. And then it also just empowers the whole conversation, right, Dan?
I'm going to say something completely absurd.
Go
Okay.
on.
I hope you're ready for it. Now, for the people that know me, you know that I always like to say that I'm number two. My role is to make others shine on stage. But for those who are new and do not know me, please forgive what sounds like an arrogant statement, but I really believe this to be the truth. And Emcee and Amy, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. While in the past, for in-person events, the speaker was probably one of the most important people on stage, I believe for virtual events, it's the moderator. I'd say the majority of speakers have not adapted to virtual, and so they are substandard and rather underwhelming on stage. And also, the only true bridge, whereas at a big conference, you would have your networking stations and your booths and your workshops and so many places to be a bridge. When it comes to virtual, the only true bridge, real-time bridge, real human bridge, is the moderator. So again, if you're new and you do not know my heart, please forgive me for what sounds like a very arrogant statement, but this is, to me, a logical conclusion, not a self-praise. I'm not in this business for putting myself up, but I truly honestly believe that the most important decision for a virtual event organizer is the moderator. That is the person that the audience spends the most time with. For an in-person event, sure, a speaker, because that's who sells the tickets, but not for virtual events.
I see that. I see where you're coming from, and I actually agree. I wanted to relate to that and say that I think MCs are also people who have to somehow smoothen the awkwardness of every day. And then in an in-person event, people sometimes might be used to MCs who just speak from a script and don't really react to things naturally. But then all these shortcomings of such MCs would be highlighted during virtual events, as they are just much more demanding. During virtual events, we have so many more things to juggle, and then we also want to lower the level of awkwardness that already comes from the sheer fact that we're virtual and everybody's in front of their screen, which doesn't seem like the most natural thing. It's not an evolutionary thing that our ancestors would do 100 or more years ago. Amy, I want to hear from you.
Yes, these words resonate strongly. I don't take that as egotistical one bit. What came to mind was the glue that holds things together. And I've had clients say that before, during, and after. This is what we're looking for. This is what you provide. This is what you achieved. You were just the glue that kept it all flowing and made sense and reacted in real time and called out the things that were happening and made the changes on the fly and really provided that cohesion.
Cohesion. I think that's a great word to describe some of our work, because especially when you have an event planning agency or just a company that wants to organize the event on their own, many times you would have people who don't just have the time to think about everything that's happening on the stage. And then if you have somebody whom you can trust, then that person can really rescue you, and they can have your back, and they can help with a lot of situations. And then you do look like you're giving me a cue that you'd like to relate to that.
Well, let's just do this as a test, right? To the audience that's watching, count the number of speakers that will be, the conversation started with the backgrounds. Count the number of speakers that are intentional about their background versus the number of moderators that intentionally about your background. I think immediately you can see the amount of effort going in. And that's just with the background. You also think about the number of in-ears, okay? The in-ear is a communication with the team. So when you are a speaker on an actual stage, you will have a timer, you will have slides, you will have comms with a moderator. Now, you'll watch closely Mathieu's face, and you will see when he switches his head to the side, he's got an in-ear monitor, which means that the team can communicate with him. Find out how many of the speakers have created a loop for the production team to talk to them. I bet it's 0. So once a speaker comes in on a virtual platform, they're on, and there's no way for them to communicate with the team about what they need, and there's no way for the team to communicate with them. Do you see how much of a liability? Event organizers, think about that. How much of a liability are speakers in the virtual world? Whereas your moderator's on your side, right? We've got monitors, we've got systems, and we're thinking about a two-way conversation. Most of the time, I'm thinking about three-way conversation. I'm thinking about me to the producer, and me to the audience, and me to the speaker. So I have 3 forms of communication that I'm handling simultaneously. Your speakers, I bet you, are only thinking about their content and not anything else. A good speaker will think about reading the comments, but most of them are working on one monitor. So the best thing they can do is have their slides on there. So they're not even engaging real time with the audience. So do this as a quick analysis and just see who's the more valuable player here.
Speaking of that, I have got this one piece of advice to all the organizers out there, and I try to stress that a lot, and it's that it really makes sense that your audience hears from your speakers, and not just from when they have their performance, when they have their 10 or 15 minutes of glory, but also if it's a 6-hour conference, how about they stay for most of the time and they react to comments, and people can actually feel that they are really there for them. And it's not just the 10 minutes that they've carved out of their daily life, and they are there and then they disappear, and then there is a discontinuation. Those things matter to me. And then this is over to Amy.
Yeah, I'm glad that the kind of backstage communication topic was opened up. Just quickly, how important that is, that the moderator is in communication not only with the production team, but with the speakers, as you said. And for instance, Dan and I were chatting behind the scenes before this. We're using WhatsApp. You can use different means of communication, but it is absolutely essential that the behind the scenes people, including the MC, always have an open line of communication during the entire event. And you have to think quick, and things are happening, and you're managing these things, and you're still on camera at the same time.
Thank you for saying that. That's Jen. That's definitely a great tip. I'd like to ask Dan, and I think we will slowly but firmly be wrapping it up. I'd like to ask you for your tips, Dan, on engagement, especially when it drops, because I think we can even see it in the chat feature right now, and it tends to be what happens usually, that at the very beginning of a new conference, people are very chatty and they are very open to conversations. But then when time passes, you see a lower and ever a lower number of new submissions, new entries, new comments, to put it simply. And so what is your solution to that?
This list could go on forever, so let me drop a couple things real quick for you. First, you have to have Easter eggs. So Easter eggs are your surprise, creative, what seems spontaneous moments to bring in some fresh energy, some new energy. I do this for day-long or 2-3 day conferences as well, where I will have some things in my back pocket that I will pull out that the audience are not expecting. So it's the same thing in virtual. You cannot just ask them to keep commenting, because that's the same behavior and it gets boring. So you got to vary it up. You got to have some third-party integrations. You got to have some games. You got to have some competitions, things to win. And so you got to keep changing it up. That's the first thing. Second, you got to have backups to the backups to the backups, right? This is really, really important, because I've been at events where the chat section fails. So then what do? Do you just ignore engagement for a while? Absolutely not. You say, hey, we're still going on Twitter with this hashtag, so use this hashtag and get in touch with us.
Brilliant.
It's important to have that backup. What do you do when the cameras fail. I've had that happen. I was interviewing a major politician in the US when all the cameras went out. Do you know what I did? I logged on
You
as
made
a
a podcast.
participant on my phone, and I streamed off of my phone. And instead of criticizing the production, which is the other option, instead of just not showing anything on screen, stand by while we come back, and the only thing then is going to be hate, what people focus on is how authentic, how real. Have we
Yeah.
not all been in that position before? And it was just love and a lot of compassion in that moment. And so you have to have backups to the backups.
I agree, and I also wanted to say that this is crisis management 101 or maybe 201 actually, because this is a level up for sure. And what I wanted to say is that I appreciate it because ownership is important. You know, it's not like
Yes.
an MC says, "Oh, it's a technical problem, so those guys have to figure it out." Because I've
Never.
met a lot of MCs who'd be like that, and then it also is a matter of we are together here to solve this issue, and it's also ingenuity. It's about your ideas and just acting fast. You know, done is better than perfect. You say that a lot, Dan, actually. But I'd like us to finish with Amy.
Okay, great on the Easter eggs. Yes, you have to be in the moment and react quickly and think quickly. We are all in this together. I'm going to end with energy. Energy, energy, energy.
Right.
People get so much more out of events when they feel positive and energized. And some of these things that we've talked about today can help them feel that way.
That for sure. And I feel like this is such an important message, and I hope that it travels the world. And speaking of traveling, I wanted to thank you, not just you, Dan and Amy, but actually the opportunity that was given to us but by all these smart people, you know, IT people who have made all these platforms, programs, cameras, lenses, you know, internet connection. I mean, I'm glad because otherwise I would have never met you.
Yes, so grateful, right? For the whole thing, just how life evolves. And then here we are talking to each other from other countries. It's awesome.
Dan?
I just want to say a big thank you, man. I've really enjoyed our journey over the years. You know, when we co-moderated an event in Krakow, I believe, a couple years ago, and just
No, that
seeing
was
you, and of
Katowice,
course,
but everything else
oh,
is
in
fine.
Katowice, and the Spark of Change community. Thank you also. You know, that opening sequence. I just want to give kudos. That opening sequence was wonderful. It was so dynamic, and immediately it raised the spirit. Talking about energy. I just loved how quick the cameras were, going from stage to stage, changing the environment, doing some pre-produced video content over some live content. That's the way to think. So anyone who's watching, think about how do I do events in 2022? This is the way to do it. And so thank you so much for these really important conversations. And I'm very honored that you include me in this.
Sure.
And me too. Thank you.
My pleasure. And you know what? Michael Cranwell just commented, I believe in making engagement a priority in the format, design, and flow of the event. All decisions should be made to promote interaction. If you happen to agree with that, please show your thumbs up. And I feel like this is the perfect ending to this conversation. And I hope that this is just a beginning of a great conversation that three of us have. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and I'm very grateful.
Thank you so much.